Hello team and welcome back to Sunday Vibes. We're not in the pub this week, but I'm not going to apologise. And you know why? Because this content is free for starters. And secondly, we have a fire lineup in the form of Patrick Van Straten and Zach Gelab. How are you boys? Starting with you, Patrick.
I'm very good. I've always been banging the drum for you don't get to complain about how bad this content is when you get it for free. So I'm glad that that's become the official FD position.
Nice. Zachary, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate. We recorded this on Thursday. Hopefully Chelsea wallop United, but I can also see us losing. So, fingers crossed that we win.
But you're a winner, Zach, because you're going to be a model in a few days' time. Is that not right?
Supposedly. Can't leak anything yet. NDA's being signed at the moment, so give it time. But people may see things very soon. Very, very soon.
People may see things. Amazing. You heard it here first.
Sounds like I'm going to be a porn star there. Jesus.
All right, on that bombshell, let's see our main topic for the week. Okay, we're basically going to be ranking the best and worst loan deals of the season on this episode. We're going to mix your suggestions in with some of our own, and come the end of the episode, crown the very best and very worst of the bunch. We say stuff like this at the start of every episode, like by the end of the episode we're going to do this, and we never do. So can we please make sure we actually deliver on said promise this week, boys? Right. Let's start with Gambling Blues suggestions. He's gone Guendouzi best, Saul at Chelsea worst. Let's start with the positive. Guendouzi. Patrick Van Straten, I'm coming to you because he's on loan at Marseille from Arsenal. Fared pretty well in the south of France, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this one may officially, semi-officially now be permanent. Like, I think it was that if he played a certain number of games, then they would automatically trigger this buy option, which is for something cartoonishly low. It's like £10 million. But Arteta was extremely keen to get him out of the club, which, to be honest, all the Arsenal fans complaining about how we haven't got very much money for him, they were clamouring to get him out. And when everybody wants a player out of a club, you don't get a lot of money. But it's worked out really well for Marseille because Guendouzi looks like one of the best progressive passing young midfielders in Europe. Marseille have gone from being a bit of a ropey kind of up and down side to the second best team in the league. So they're going to be back in Champions League football. They've got a really clear style of play, which you'd expect from Sampaoli, though actually they're not as insanely pressy as you would expect them to be under him. But Guendouzi's really thriving in this interesting role. Obviously, previously, he's been playing as a deep midfielder. At Arsenal, he's playing as a deep midfielder. You'd kind of have him in that Xhaka role. He'd get to float around, pass forward. Wasn't hugely defensively active, but lots of progressive carries, lots of progressive passes. This year has really been between the midfield line and the line of three behind the striker. So a bit more creativity, 9 goals and assists in league play, which is very, very good, I would say, especially for somebody who's new to that position. He's still only 23 and has really been showing his authority over games, which is kind of what stood out about him when he first came to the Prem, right? You looked at him and you thought, wow, this is a guy who is able to take control late in matches. Yeah, in a way that you tend to see with older players. Like I remember, of course, a couple of Arsenal's games against Spurs, he was really, really authoritative. And in that match, I think when we came back and won 3-2 against Villa, when we were down a man, he was the guy driving us on. He was the guy who really made it happen. Now, obviously, he's got a lot of defensive cover in this side. You know, they've got Boubacar Kamara, they've got Gerson. These guys have been really mopping things up in the middle of the park. And he has been able to express himself a little bit more. But like I said, top 1% of midfielders across Europe for progressive carries, top 5% for carries into the penalty area as well, which isn't something you'd expect to happen. He's still getting on the ball all the time in the middle third, about 45 times a game, which is an awful lot. I mean, I think N'Golo Conte gets on the ball in the middle third about 32 times a game. So that really shows you, how much he is dominating the ball in the middle of the park, and Marseille themselves dominate the ball a lot, 62% of the ball. So overall, they've got a guy for about half his market value according to Transfermarkt, and as we always say, Transfermarkt's market values tend to be extremely low. So this looks like a great move. I don't really know how much market value matters here because it's hard to see who would eventually go for Guendouzi one day unless he turns into a genuine world beater, because his reputation is as a bit of a... But Marseille have got themselves a starter for the next 10 years if they want him and if they can keep him under control. And fair play to them, I think any version of Ligue 1 which brings in viewers, any version of Ligue 1 which attracts neutrals to watch it, contains a high quality Marseille side. Marseille are one of the historic clubs in France, and so it's really nice to see them thriving, and it's really nice to see them doing it with a really attractive style and with young French players.
Yeah, like you said, the only French side to win European silverware still at the time of recording. Oh, PSG are out of the Champions League, aren't they? So that'll still be the case moving into the new season. I think Marseille pretty much have second place wrapped up, don't they? Thanks to the midfield efforts of Guendouzi and many others who are sort of excelling in that Sampaoli system. I'm sure we'll get onto Saliba in just a second. Let's move on to Saul then at Chelsea, your neck of the woods. Zachary Gelab only played 380 minutes for the Blues this season. That's not a whole lot of minutes for someone that has racked up an awful lot of them over the last 6 or 7 years for Atletico Madrid. Why hasn't he fit in this side? Please break it down for me.
Yeah, well, this is Gaming Blues' suggestion for worst. I think you mentioned his minutes there. I'm pretty sure 90 of them came against Luton. Another also came against a lower league.
No, that's
opposition.
league minutes. That's league minutes. He has
league minutes.
A little
Jesus.
bit more on rotation in cup competitions, hasn't he? But that's league minutes.
Well, again, 45 minutes of them came against Aston Villa, which was horrible. I think he also played another 45 minutes against Aston Villa, which was a little bit better. But yeah, he started really, really poorly. He even cost Chelsea a few goals at times. It looked like it was more of a kind of... It felt like when he was on the pitch, Chelsea were going to concede. There were too many mistakes. And after about a couple of months, he did seem to maybe at least fit a little bit. But Thomas Tuchel just doesn't seem to want to play him, especially at this point in the season when a draw or a win is so crucial for Chelsea, or at least in the FA Cup, like we're in the final now. I'm not necessarily too surprised, because this is a guy who in his last season at Atletico Madrid was barely featuring then as well. An Atletico Madrid side that he, as you mentioned, was featuring all the time when he was younger. He was very consistently in that squad. Although his injury record is a little bit patchy at best, was not necessarily not in the squad due to a long-term injury. I think he only missed a maximum of 5 games in one injury one succession of injuries. Since he's been at Chelsea, he's just not really done much. Like, he's not really a specialist in the way that Chelsea have in their midfield. Like, when Jorginho plays, you play him because you want him to tick the game along, to make those kind of progressive passes when they're needed. Or you get Kovacic, who will win who can dribble through the midfield and connect defence to attack, or Kante, who can kind of do it all apart from shoot. Even Ruben Loftus-Cheek has something that, okay, he's not necessarily the best, and maybe Thomas Tuchel loves him and thinks that he can get to that point, but even he can kind of is more of an attacking midfielder, and a guy that with his frame and strength he can kind of bully the midfield if needed, or even at times playing right wing back. Whereas Saul doesn't really do much. Like, he doesn't really do anything specialist, which is what Chelsea kind of need in their midfield. He has filled in at left wing back when needed for Chelsea. Obviously, with Ben Chilwell being injured, he's featured there for us, but he didn't really, again, set the world alight there, to the point where Marcos Alonso is still playing.
He didn't prosper at left wing back.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, Chelsea got into that situation where they knew going into this or the previous summer just gone, that they needed another midfielder. Kante had shown the previous season that his injury, he was starting to pick up a consistent amount of injuries. Although Jorginho had a great Champions League campaign, he had shown in the Premier League still that there were consistent mistakes, and that would he be able to feature in every single game? Thomas Tuchel was changing him out for a Kovacic and Kante midfield at times. He did end up playing in the Champions League final against Man City with Kante, but this year showed that Kovacic seems to be that main guy. That Kovacic Kante midfield, when they're both fit, is what he wants to do, and that they did need more rotation options. That's why they kept someone like Ruben Loftus-Cheek rather than selling him or putting him on loan again. And that last minute they were looking to try and have someone a bit more a bit more experience or a bit more pedigree, and in the end went for a risk on Saul, and I think it's a risk that probably hasn't quite worked out in his favour.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite sad, isn't it? He's gone from being this tireless runner with pretty sound defensive output. I think it was 3 seasons at Atletico Madrid where he put up around 5 tackles, interceptions, despite not necessarily being the defensive midfielder. He also had decent efficacy in front of goal. I think he had a goal or assist every 5 games in the Spanish capital, despite not being the attacking midfielder. But now has become somewhat of a ghost around Stamford Bridge. Only Ross Barkley has fewer minutes, Premier League minutes, among outfield players than him. Although, silver lining, Rodrigo de Paul, who was effectively his replacement in the summer, not exactly set the world on fire at the Wanda Metropolitano, has he? So maybe Saul will be thinking, listen, I've played an awful lot of minutes. I'm still in my mid-20s. I'll take this season to recuperate, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to rob my plays back off Rodrigo de Paul. Anyway, let's move on to Swagato Sarkar 99's suggestion of Conor Gallagher being the best loan deal. Now, this was a common suggestion. 11 goals and assists and 29 Premier League starts. His form has dried up somewhat without a goal contribution in his last 11 games for club and country. But Palace's attack as a whole has slowed down, right? Currently averaging the same amount of shots per 90 as Watford. They are sort of ambling over the line in their bid to finish around mid-table, aren't they? Or lower mid-table. Still doing a reasonable amount off the ball, Gallagher, even though his threat in front of goal has been a little bit diminished in recent weeks. Top 5% of midfielders for defensive pressures per 90. So still putting himself about. But we've spoke about his form time and time again, haven't we? On winners and losers throughout the season. So I thought let's touch upon, or let's speculate about his future a little bit more than his form at present. Now, guys, I'm going to come to you first, Pat, because Zach just took over on a Chelsea-themed answer. Do you think he should return to Chelsea and look to establish himself, or move elsewhere, given that they only play with 2 out-and-out midfielders under Thomas Tuchel, and there's a sprinkling of floating 8s in there, isn't there? But does he get a meaningful amount of minutes under Thomas Tuchel next season at Chelsea? I want you to get your crystal ball out.
I think possibly he does if Loftus-Cheek is playing regularly, because I think Loftus-Cheek has been really bad. Like, I do not... It's a pity because there was a time when I was quite positive about him, but I don't understand why he's playing for Chelsea this season. I don't really see what he offers. And Conor Gallagher is a weird midfielder. Yeah, Conor Gallagher's a strange one because people talk as if he's got like the attacking numbers of a forward, and he doesn't. He's at about 0.3 expected goals per 90, which is very good, but he's out over his skis with finishing. He's got 8 goals from about 5.5 XG. So that will come down a bit. He's also never on the ball, ever. Like, he's in the bottom 3% of midfielders for progressive passes. He's in the bottom 10% for passes and touches overall. He's not on the ball a lot. So what he does, like you said, he presses an awful lot. He defends pretty well. And he makes those off-the-ball runs. So the question is that because of who he is? Or is that just the way he's being used in this current system? Because if it's because of who he is... I don't think he's going to play under Tuchel. I think he'll go back in the summer. Tuchel will look at him and he'll say, this guy's got talent, but he's not for me. If it's because of how he's being used, which was kind of the case with Mason Mount under Frank Lampard, I think Tuchel will say, oh, I can make this guy a star. Or we're just going to ask him to start passing and he'll be good at it. And to be honest, that is exactly what happened with Mount. Before Mount and Tuchel kind of combined, Mount wasn't on the ball that much. His creative numbers weren't that good. His passing numbers weren't that good. Tuchel comes in. He says, we're going to give the ball to Mount. And suddenly those numbers go through the roof. So it really comes down to that. And to be honest, I don't think any of us really know, except for the people who've watched him, train at Chelsea, I think, or seen him train in a different system. So that's an open question to me. But is there an opportunity to get the minutes at Chelsea next season? Definitely. If Loftus-Cheek is playing, definitely. With Saul going, definitely. And let's not forget, Jorginho and N'Golo Kanté are both out of contract at the end of 2023. Chelsea are still waiting to be sold, and we have no idea what they'll be able to do in the market this summer. So the wise thing from Chelsea's point of view would be to keep hold of any assets who might be able to make a difference for them in the Premier League. And Conor Gallagher, if there's one thing we know for certain about Conor Gallagher, it's that he's a Premier League quality central midfielder. So from that point of view, I think he probably will stay at Chelsea next season, and I think he'll probably get a reasonable number of minutes.
I think Ruben Loftus-Cheek has about 1,200 in the league, which
Jesus.
is more than I anticipated.
That is a lot.
Some of them have come at right wing back, which has quite clearly been a very awkward position for him to play in. But that's also happened while your boy, who's the central midfielder, the other central midfielder is out of the team injured, right?
Cover.
Kovacic. So Kovacic brings the drive, like you've said. Jorginho brings the passing. Kante brings the defensive cover. Mason Mount, Kai Havertz, even Ziyech can operate in those floating 8 spaces. If they all remain, Zach, it's going to be hard for Conor Gallagher to getting the team playing to his strengths, right? And I know Pat's just highlighted we don't know if he has other strengths we just haven't seen in loan stints at Charlton, West Brom, Crystal Palace. But it's still going to be difficult nonetheless. What is your gut instinct as a Chelsea fan before we move on?
I think he will stay. I think he will stay this season, at least for this season or the upcoming season, and try and fight for a place in that side. I think Thomas Tuchel does like players that work hard, and that is probably one of the best things that Conor Gallagher does. He fights for the ball. He does work really, really hard for his team, and whether you're right, whether the formation is perfect to fit him in, I'm not so sure. During pre-season, I remember him playing in one of those 2 midfield slots, and he did it to a decent level. But now I think, obviously, having played at West Brom with the kind of talent that was around him, he's been able to improve so much more, having at least a better squad in Crystal Palace. I would like to see him play for Chelsea, because I do think he can fit into one of those 2 central midfield roles. And I'd be very interested. I think Chelsea may lose a few players this summer. One of them being Jorginho. And if that is the case, I do think it is 100% worth keeping Conor Gallagher. And seeing what he becomes.
Jorginho's going out the door. Have you heard him link with anyone else? Is this chatter around the club? Because obviously when you think Chelsea exits, you immediately think players who are competing for positions in the final third, don't you? Who aren't getting minutes, like, I don't know, Pulisic, Hudson-Odoi, Ziyech, not necessarily Jorginho, unless they go in big for Declan Rice. But yeah, why did you say Jorginho?
There's a lot of talk about his agent talking to Italy and specifically Juventus. Pat mentioned his contract runs out in 2023. So if Chelsea are going to make any money on him, considering they did spend about £50 million on him a few years back in 2018, then this is the summer to do it. Otherwise, you're going to be in the same situation like we have with half of the defence this year, where you either going to have to give him a new contract. He's already into his 30s. Is that something you want to do? Or you cash in and, okay, you're not going to probably get £50 million for a guy that's got a year left on his deal, but you may be able to get 25 or something like that and cash in. And I don't think even we've seen recently, like, he's not the number one name on the team sheet anymore. Like, when Kovacic is fit and Kante is fit, it's those two. And we've even seen times it's Kovacic and Ruben when Jorginho's been on the bench. And he has also, for kind of half this season, been nursing a hip injury and playing through a hip injury. Like, I do think maybe he's not, obviously he's never relied on his pace and anything like this, but his agility might be slow. I feel like I do see a lot more. If he wants
to elongate his career, get to a less physically punishing division. Is that what you're saying?
Precisely, yeah, exactly. And so maybe that might help him out, and it might be both for kind of like, it might be best for both parties. And there you go, like another position opens up in midfield for old Connor.
Yeah, fair enough. Right, nice. Let's move on to Swagato Sarkar's worst suggestion. Then, as you notice, most people have sent in their best and worst. He's actually sent in 2, but we'll let him off because he contributes week in, week out. Absolute MVP. He's gone Donny van der Beek and Anthony Martial.
Good shout.
Now, Donny van der Beek, I didn't realise, had a thigh injury. That's why he hasn't featured in that many Premier League games of late. I think since he joined on January 31st, he's only featured in 5 of a possible 11 Premier League fixtures. But unlike his time at United, not down to being, ostracised or out of favour, it is because of fitness. So when he's fit, he'll probably find himself back in the side straight away. I mean, Alex Iwobi did start on the left-hand side of the midfield 3 against Liverpool, which which was fairly ugly, wasn't it? So yeah, their midfield, the complexion of their midfield, poor at the moment. Anthony Martial, 0 goals, 1 assist in 7 league starts this season. Although Sevilla, I did notice while I was doing a little bit of research, are struggling in attack. I think Rafa Mir's their top goal scorer on 9, and Nesri, who scored 18 in the last campaign, has 3 to his name. And Lopetegui's men 8th for goals from open play on 29, but first for set-piece goals. So, maybe quite attritional there at current. Still 3rd in the league, still holding on to that 3rd place, but Atletico are right up their backside now. Does anyone have anything to add about either of those two? I think Donny, not the worst, because of things out of his control, like his thigh. Anthony Martial, that is bitterly disappointing for him, isn't it? Because I think it was seen that a clean break would be good for him and Manchester United. Had he prospered, Sevilla would have taken up that option to buy, perhaps. But now it looks like he might be returning to Manchester United, having just seen a year of his career pass by. Does anyone have anything to add on either of those players?
I mean, they're both going to be very, very interested in the summer, right? When Erik ten Hag joins, Donny's going to be looking at it and going, brilliant. The manager that I had my best time under is now at the club where I'm getting paid a ridiculous amount of money. So he'll be over the moon to try and get into that starting 11. As for Martial, like I can maybe see him having a couple of pre-season games and Erik ten Hag very quickly making a decision on what to do with him, because you have to now. Like, too long we've seen Martial in this United side, and he did have that fantastic campaign where he scored 18 goals in the Premier League, and after that he got injured, and since then we've only seen him going downhill. But I think Donny will be okay. I just think with Martial, like, a decision needs to be made very, very quickly under Erik ten Hag.
I think that's a sensible assessment. Let's move on to Yashir Ahmed 12's suggestion of Saliba for best then. And he's another player we've spoke about in terms of performances quite extensively. What I wanted to ask you, Pat, about Saliba was, as an Arsenal fan, do you want him back at the club this summer competing for a centre-back berth? Or do you think that the Gunners should use his red-hot form as an opportunity to recoup some of that £27 million outlay on him to then put towards a striker? What do you think about this, holistically?
I think you have to keep him. I think he's... Are you going to get much more than like 30 million for him? Maybe you get 40 if you're lucky. But I think he looks like he's probably a better player than that. He looks like maybe the best young centre-back in Europe right now. I mean, he looks that good. So, and when I look at Arsenal's centre-back options, they've basically got 3. They've got Gabriel, they've got Holding, and they've got White. And I don't know. I like Gabriel and I like White. I'm not an enormous fan of either one.
What makes you say that?
Gabriel's
what
extremely.
do you have about him?
Gabriel's more of a defender than White, but he's extremely inconsistent. Against Chelsea last week, Arsenal actually put in an amazing defensive performance, especially when you consider their missing Partey. I think they gave up about 0.5 expected goals. They were unlucky to concede 2. And then against Man United at the weekend, absolute clown show, complete embarrassment. And Gabriel was awful. And, of course, there were extenuating circumstances here, swapping out Tierney for Tavares, taking out Partey. These are factors. And the whole back line was off it that day. But Gabriel was terrible. And he's not particularly great on the ball. Ben White has really grown into the role this season. I think he'll be a good player for Arsenal going forward. But Saliba has a bit of a combination of both of them. He has the kind of size and some of the defensive output of Gabriel, but he looks like an amazing passer. Again, same as we said before about Guendouzi, this Sampaoli system really does juice passing numbers, but by any measure, Saliba's passing numbers are absolutely off the scale. He's in the top 1% of centre-backs for passes. He's in the top 2% for pass completion, and that's despite playing difficult passes, because he's in the top 8% for progressive passes. He completes about as many passes into the final third as a really good central midfielder, as many as Thomas Partey, for that matter. He's in the top 3% of centre-backs for progressive carries. He's constantly driving the team forward. Really, and defensively as well, great ability to tackle dribblers. I mean, we've seen that this season against guys like Mbappe. So this is, no slouch, and puts up close to 4 defensive actions a game. Good in the air as well, wins over 60% of his aerial duels, and he's 21. He's played more minutes for Marseille this season than anybody else. Like, to see a centre-back who's very young starting all the time for a good team is actually really, really rare. It's really rare. We talk about Ben White as a young centre-back. He's 24. So, to me, I don't really see what value there is in selling him. If somebody offers an obscene amount of money, then maybe, but Arsenal need a centre-back, at least one, going into next season, and they have one of the best ones around right now coming back to them for free. So the hope is that what's happened to him over the last few years hasn't completely torched his goodwill towards the club. And by all accounts, it seems that it hasn't. There are, again, a lot of extenuating circumstances there. Deaths in the family and the lack of a kind of a year where he could adapt to the Premier League, I think. So I would definitely keep him, especially because I don't think that Arsenal's attempt to sign a striker is going to be contingent on bringing in some money for Saliba. I think you have to bring him back, and I haven't seen anybody seriously suggesting that we should sell him, but if somebody offers an absolutely crazy amount of money, then obviously you consider it.
Arsenal perhaps at the same crossroads that Chelsea found themselves at with Tomori. And look how that panned out. Maybe they're keen not to make the same mistakes.
And Tino Livramento. Yeah.
I mean, Marseille, like you said, been brilliant going forward, possession dominant side, but also conceding just 0.97 goals per 90 this term, which is the second best record in the division and their best record since the 2012-13 season. So we are seeing a little bit of attack is the best form of defence, but a very composed defence nonetheless, who deserve credit for being a great foundation for the front six to build on. Zacharias, Yazir Ahmed 12's second suggestion as worst was Ainsley Maitland-Niles. Oh, I lost my Word document then and began to panic. Take us through that suggestion, please, if you can.
Yeah, well, this is a guy who, bless him, needed to play football. He needed to play football. In the summer last year, Arsenal turned down a £10 million bid from Everton. And I remember him putting on Instagram, like, I just want to play football. Like, why won't they let me go? And Mikel Arteta said, well, I want him on the team. And then never used him and never played him. And he's always kind of had issues throughout his time at Arsenal, whether it was that he saw himself as a centre midfielder, others saw him as a winger, others saw him as a fullback, and it never quite worked out with him at the Emirates. But he got his loan move. He got his loan move in January, and he got it to Roma to go and join Jose Mourinho, who had obviously brought over Tammy Abraham from the Premier League, and he'd been a really good his first 6 months, and obviously since that as well has been really, really successful. And you kind of hoped, at least for Ainsley Maitland-Niles, it would kind of go the same way for him. However, it hasn't, sadly. He has been deployed as a right wing back for them, and the last time he featured for them in the league was back in February during a draw with 2-2 with Verona. So it hasn't quite gone so well for him. Obviously, at the end of this season, he has one more year left on his deal. So if any club were to go in for him, it would probably be for less than the £10 million that Everton offered, maybe even half of that for 5. But he's maybe got to set his heights at the right level here. I mean, whether it would have made a difference if he'd gone to Everton and kind of helped Everton this season, obviously they're in a relegation battle, but he'd be looking to try and maybe get in at a low league Premier League side. Like getting into Roma, who are obviously battling in the European Conference League, is a pretty high step, and it shows a level here. If you were playing consistently, you could try and join a team who's trying to battle for Europa League place next season in the Premier League or whatever it might be, whatever teams come for you. But the fact it's not gone well even at Roma, who are fully focusing now on the Conference League, means that maybe the level for next season needs to drop a bit. But I mean, as to which club that is, I don't know. Yeah,
there's a fair few Premier League sides that could probably use someone with his level of, tactical versatility. Can play fullback, can play in central midfield. Hasn't nailed down a position as of yet, has he? Because he's not got an awful lot of league minutes under his belt. I'm thinking maybe a Wolves. Maybe they'll be slightly more aspirational if they do finish 7th, 8th. But if they find themselves Ruben Neves less, then he might be a decent pickup for £8 million. Can you think of anyone else, Pat, who would benefit from having him around the squad, filling in various holes?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because the whole point before was he wanted to play central midfield, and he's a good dribbler, but he's just, I don't know, he's a bit too unreliable on the ball for central midfield, in my view. Like, if you're a central midfielder, and I've said this before, you can basically never drop below a 6. You never really need to be a 9 or a 10, but to be a really good central midfielder, you can't ever just have an awful game where you're constantly giving the ball away. And he does tend to do that. There's a sloppiness in his game. However, he's actually got... When you said he doesn't have a lot of minutes, he has got quite a few minutes as a fullback for Arsenal. Because obviously he's played on both sides, and he was playing there years ago under Wenger. Like, that's how long he's been around, despite being 24. So I think as a defensive fullback, he does actually have a pretty good argument. And so I look at his age, and I look at his versatility and his physical gifts as well, because he is fast, and he does work hard. And I think maybe a Brentford, maybe someone like that. If he's really committed to playing central midfield, I think he'd need to take a pay cut and go to a high transition league like the Bundesliga, where the fact that he can be a little bit sloppy would be outweighed by his pressing, by his dribbling, his physical gifts. But I think that would be a significant, pay. You could imagine him going to like a Hoffenheim and being good. But I think if he wants to stay in the Prem, a smart team like Leeds or Wolves or Brentford, that kind of feels about right. And I think that he'd get plenty of minutes, but maybe not consistently in one position.
Yeah, I agree. And applying that Bundesliga logic, maybe he could go, for a German flavour, a little bit closer to home in the form of Southampton, who play quickly, don't they? Play aggressively, play vertically. Don't necessarily need their central midfielders to be really, really good on the ball. So yeah, I'm sure he'll find at home, and I'm sure someone will get him for a snip. Let's move on then to Max DJ Goodwin's suggestion of best, which is Jed Spence to Forest. And yeah, a little bit of a weird loan move, championship club to championship club, and the player prospering. And benefiting from moving away from his parent club. You don't see that very often, do you? Arrive at the City Ground in August on a season-long loan deal from Middlesbrough. Then manager, Neil Warnock, said that he allowed him to move to sort himself out. Don't know what that means. Don't know if Jed Spence was just reluctant to play hoofball that Neil Warnock was definitely employing at the club at the time. But sort himself out he did. He's got 36 appearances under his belt at the time of recording for Steve Cooper's side. 6 goals and assists so far, which is a career best. He's absolutely thrived in that wing-back role, which has supposedly alerted Tottenham.
And Arsenal.
Maybe they're potential suitors for him come the summer. But not the only youngster in that setup to catch the eye of Premier League sides. Brennan Johnson, the young striker, has done really, really well. I think 25 goal contributions from him. James Garner. I've only watched him in one game this season, and that was against Liverpool, but he put in a very mature defensive performance and has an impressive array of passing. So yeah, I think it was claimed in the tabloids in recent weeks that Borough are looking for around £15 million for his services, but that is a drop in the ocean to Premier League clubs. And for a club like Tottenham, who are struggling in that position, whether it be Doherty, whether it be the Brazilian that they bought from Barcelona. Yeah, no one has really nailed it down, have they? So that could be a smart move. Do we think he should, if Forest do get promoted, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you this, Zach, do you think he should stick or twist, as in stay with Forest if they can pay the money, or use this form to propel himself up the league table and go to a bigger side?
Yeah, I mean, he's been so important to them this season. That obviously, I think if Middlesbrough are saying that Forest only have to pay £15 million, then I think that would be probably worth it. Obviously, they're very, very close to maybe that automatic place as well. They could, after the Bournemouth result as well. This weekend's football could be huge for Forest and Bournemouth, to be fair. And so, yeah, if he gets into the if Forest get into the Premier League and Forest can pay the £15 million supposedly that Middlesbrough want, then I think definitely worth it, because if he can then go and show his expertise because to jump from a championship side straight into a Spurs, or as I mentioned, Arsenal have been linked to him. It puts a lot of pressure on you straight away, especially as you mentioned that Royale hasn't really been amazing. Doherty's now out for the season, and he might even be out at the beginning of next season.
It's not a path that worked out well for Sessegnon, is it?
Yeah,
but he is a little bit older. Jed Spence,
It's
I think
true.
he's 21 now.
But that's what I mean. Whereas if he goes into Forest do get promoted, and he can have a year there and kind of perform pretty well, then the option may be there for the next season. It's up. I guess it's up to him, and I guess on the pitch that Spurs give him, because Spurs could say that we will play every game, but may not do, depending on if Conte likes him or not. But I think stick with Forest if they get promoted.
What do you think, Pat? Stick or twist? Do you move to Tottenham if you're Jed Spence and you get the opportunity, or do you maybe make a more sensible decision and stick with Forest?
I think if you're a wing back and you get a chance to work under the manager who is best at working with wing backs in the world, then you probably do that. I mean, plus get paid. Get paid, man. Like,
that is a very good
I would
point.
definitely go. If I were a wing back, I'd go to Spurs. Even now, I'd go to Spurs and play wing back. It'd be interesting. See what happened.
Yeah, fair. Right, let's move on to the next suggestion then, that comes from Deathstroke33. It's Billy Gilmour as worst. Didn't submit a best, just went straight in with Billy Gilmour. And no, it's not worked out for Billy Gilmour at Norwich this season. But then again, what has at Carrow Road? Pat, what are your thoughts on Billy Gilmour, who, lest we forget, was being booed by Norwich fans earlier in the campaign, which I found one of the weirder things to happen this season?
Yeah, I don't watch Norwich for the same reason I don't watch Faces of Death or something. Like I don't need to see that. So I don't have as much knowledge as Norwich fans do, and if they're booing him, then maybe they've got a good reason to. But when you look at his numbers, they're perfectly respectable. Like, guy's on the ball quite a lot, guy passes forward quite a lot, he presses a lot, his defensive numbers are fine. He's kind of putting a shift in a team which has, to be honest with you, been abominably bad. I mean, Dean Smith actually kind of managed to make them respectable over the back half of this campaign, but just the talent isn't there. It really isn't. The guys who were meant to be great have not kicked on. Quite a few of them have left. Teemu Pukki is the only guy really doing anything of note. It's been a rough ride, especially for a central midfielder. And if you're a 21-year-old forward and you're not getting minutes and you're not putting up numbers, that's a bit of a red flag. If you're a central midfielder, it's not that bad. It kind of happens because midfielders do need to be consistent, like I said before. So the fact that Gilmour's had a rough ride this season, I think, is less important than the fact that he's got a decent number of minutes. So I wouldn't worry too much. I guess that if I were him and I was going back to Chelsea and they were looking to send me out on loan again, I'd say, I want to work with you to find a side that's actually going to fit the way that I play. Otherwise, I'm going to look terrible forever. He needs to go to a team that's going to dominate possession. He needs to go to a team, dominate possession. I suppose he's not going to go to a top half Premier League team, but he needs to go to a team that wants to play a certain way. Maybe a Palace type of side. I don't know if that's too high for him, but if I were him, that's the kind of thing I'd be looking for. And if I couldn't get it in the Prem, I'd get it in the Championship.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing him strut his stuff for Fulham next season. Zachary, how damaging do you think the season has been in terms of him breaking into the Chelsea setup in the future? Because, post those League Cup games against Liverpool, everyone waxing lyrical about him, saying he's the future of Chelsea's midfield. Has this season been a little bit of a reality check for him, or is it not representative still of the ability, that he has and the effect he can have at Chelsea? What do you make of it?
I think it definitely raises questions, because he was also fantastic at the Euros for Scotland as well, I thought. But it definitely does raise questions about maybe the level that he can go to. I remember, and I still do stand by it, that Liverpool game in particular, in a midfield where he was playing against Fabinho, he was the better midfielder that day. He was fantastic. And he has had games for Chelsea where he's been brilliant. And I don't know whether he is one of these players that, obviously playing in central midfield, he is much better when he has kind of better players around him. He can kind of play those more advanced balls, or he can and expect that winger, or whether it's Hakim Ziyech compared to Rashika, is going to be there to collect it and give it back or whatnot. And so I definitely think there's still a play in there. And I agree with Pat. He needs to go to a side that will play the right football for him, that will want to try and dominate possession and will want to kind of not just get by games as the way Norwich kind of have to at times. But
what a depressing ethos.
It is, and I agree. Like, okay, if that loan move isn't available in the Prem, then you do go to the Championship for it. The worry Chelsea have is, his contract runs out in 2023, and so they'd have to get him to sign a new contract this season, or probably sell him, because I don't know whether even one good year at, say, a Palace or whatever it may be gets him into that mid. Like, he'd have to basically have a season like Conor Gallagher has to try and get into the Chelsea squad. And if you've only got one season to prove that, and he doesn't sign a new deal, then he'll probably head off wherever else afterwards. But maybe he signs a new contract, and we'll see, and that makes at that point redundant. But for now, yeah, he's definitely going on loan again. Where that is, I'm not too sure. But you mentioned Fulham. Like, I don't think that would be a bad. Like, it's better than I think Norwich would have been, put it that way.
Well, they try and be ball dominant when they come up, don't they? At the very least. Yeah, maybe I'll just get defensive about him because he's a prodigious young Scottish talent. I say young, he's almost 21. So, like Pat said, it was essential he got minutes under his belt, and at least he can tick that box for this season. But Max Aarons hasn't progressed. Todd Cantwell left on loan. £9 million man. Josh Sargent has only scored 2 Premier League goals, and they're in one game. Ozan Kabak has only played 11 times in the Premier League. Rashika, you just mentioned, only 3 goals and assists. So no one has really fared well, have they, in that Norwich side, even if they are finishing a bit more respectably under Dean Smith. Let's move on then to @N_imperfect suggestion of saying it has to be Nico Williams.
Good shout.
Really
good shout.
I think Nico Williams got a bit of grief at Liverpool by virtue of not being Trent, let's say. So I'm glad that he's faring well at Fulham. Have you looked at any of his numbers, Pat? Have you come across him in any scripts that you've wrote in the recent past?
No, but I hear he has been good. That's about all I know. I know he's like, I know he's defending a lot. I know he can dribble kind of a bit. I think he's yeah, I don't know. He seems like the sort of player that you get when you're an ambitious side in the Championship. So it'd be intriguing to see what happens next. And I'm sure that Liverpool have quite an interesting plan. I imagine that he'll get a loan to a lower mid-table Premier League side next season, and we'll see if he can progress. And it will just be another annoying asset that Liverpool have and probably sell for a ridiculous markup.
Yeah, there are rumours that he's going to return to Fulham on loan because they're going to send him in that direction to help smooth over the Fabio Carvalho transfer that looks pretty imminent. But like you said, he's gone there. He's played 14 games, got 4 goals and assists under his belt. Top for tackles and interceptions per 90 with 4. Top for dribbles per 90 on 1.4. There's not a lot more he could have done in that half a season to suggest that he does have a high ceiling and can maybe cut the mustard at Liverpool if given a better run in the side. But let's move on to @YouandMore8 suggestion for worst, and that is El Ghazi. Zachary, why is El Ghazi getting absolutely battered on my timeline? He was every second person's suggestion for worst.
To be honest, man, I completely forgot he even went on loan to Everton until I read this script earlier. He'd only featured 9 times for Aston Villa this season before he'd even moved to Everton. And then since moving to Everton, he's played 13 minutes. Oh, so it's not great reading that, especially with a side that needed their January business to work. They needed some guys to deliver for them, whether it's defensively or in attacking sense. And El Ghazi has not done that at all. Obviously, he was a signing for Rafa Benitez when he was there. Would Frank Lampard have made that same signing? I don't know. But yeah, look, if you're featuring for 13 minutes and you're going on loan, like, it's never going to be a good one. And it's a weird one in general, right? Like, Everton already, I feel like for the past 5 years, we constantly say Everton have so many wingers. Whether it was Theo Walcott back in the day, and they signed Andros Townsend, and we were like, why are they doing that? But here, they signed El Ghazi, who hadn't featured that much for Aston Villa, in an area where they already had Damari Gray. They've got Anthony Gordon, who, if he gets relegated, I hope he stays in the Premier League, just because I love him, and I think he's such else, which is amazing. Townsend, and obviously Richarlison can feature out there as well when needed. It's really, really odd. It was odd business at the time. And yeah, 13 minutes, mate. Just the number 13, as they say, unlucky for some.
Exactly, 13.
Sorry, is your argument that those wingers are good? That Everton
No. But my argument is that he's not even getting in over them.
I agree with that. But I think that for some people the angle is well, why did they loan him? Because they've already got solid wingers. Their wingers are dog. They're terrible. The whole squad. The whole squad is rank. The whole squad is rank. But Townsend and Gray are not good wingers, and the fact that he can't get in over them is absolutely mental. I mean, this Everton squad is hilarious. It's just absolutely all over the shop. It's got some players in it who are probably Champions League level, and then it's got players in it who'll be lucky to get minutes in the Championship. It's been horribly mismanaged, and it's just a pity that the people who are actually going to suffer as a result of it are the fans, instead of who've run it, and the appalling managers who've done terrible jobs there. Well, actually, there's mostly just one of those. And the terrible backroom staff who built this abominable squad. It's just hilarious. And it's kind of funny that at the beginning of the season when they got in Damari Gray, I was like, Jesus, what a horrible move. And then he had a good start to the season. Everyone was like, egg on your face, Damari Gray's having a great start to the season. Well, he's going to end the season in the Championship. So I actually kind of feel okay about that shout, even though I don't really want Everton to get relegated. As a club, I do want them to get relegated as a cautionary tale for everybody who mismanages a club to this degree.
Damari, I think, is harsh. They barely spent any money, but sure.
I can't believe we talked about Anwar El Ghazi on this, by the way. We've spent more minutes talking about the fucker on this show than he spent on the pitch this season. Jesus.
Excellent stuff. Right, let's go back up the table then with at Nolo G Totti suggestion of Kulusevski.
Does that count?
Kulusevski for best loan.
Technically, yeah.
If this counts as
a view to a permanent.
If this counts as a loan, then yeah, this guy's absolutely right. He is this is an amazing loan. He's totally correct. He's been unbelievable. 9
goals and assists in 11 starts. But of course, does this qualify because he did sign on with an obligation to buy, right, Patrick Van Straten?
Well, they paid a big loan fee for him, which was basically them saying, yeah, we are going to end up paying the fee to make this permanent. And now they have said they are going to do that. And of course they're going to do that because he's been unbelievable. I mean, 9 goals and assists in 11 starts would be good for anybody. It's great for a Spurs side who have desperately needed a third striker since Dele Alli got injured, 3 years ago. He just looks like the complete package. To be honest, he looks exactly like what we thought he was going to be when we were talking him up when he was at Parma. He looks like that player. He looks like exactly what Juventus hoped they were getting when they bought him from Atalanta. So this shouldn't come as a shock to anyone. It's just great that Spurs have got him. He's enormous. He works incredibly hard. I mean, he's in the top 1% of players in his position for pressures. Big defensive numbers. His expected goal numbers are good, or they're very good, but they're not absolutely incredible. There's still some room to grow there, but he's incredibly good on the ball. He gets loads of touches in the dangerous areas. He works really hard. He's a physical matchup for basically anybody in the league. And now, Spurs, for years everyone said, they've got to keep Kane and Son. They've got to keep Kane and Son, otherwise they won't be relevant anymore. But Kane and Son are going to change over the next few years. Son is in his late 20s now. He is going to start to lose pace. It will happen. And they're going to have to think about what comes next. Well, in Kulusevski, they've at least got one guy who looks like he guarantees the future of their attack. So, great signing. Looks like a really good fit as well with the manager, however long that manager may be there. This is an annoyingly great signing for Spurs.
Yeah, despite the creative accounting, we are going to say that qualifies as a loan move. And like you said, proved to be a significant upgrade on Lucas Moura on that right wing, which is no mean feat because he has been a great servant for Tottenham for the last half decade. Let's move on to Kev Jack's suggestion. And we've got some Scottish football in here, boys. I know you've been looking forward to this. Cameron Carter-Vickers to Celtic, baby. This is his 7th loan spell away from Tottenham. And he's finally found a home, gentlemen, at Parkhead. He has been an absolute man-mountain this season. You're going to have to take my word for it because I know you both don't watch Scottish football. But what a player he has been. Now, 2 players that you may have thought, that you might have thought would have prospered in Scottish football. Amad Diallo and Aaron Ramsey to Rangers. Now, when these loan signings went down, I think at Football Daily we were all unanimously gobsmacked. And they've only got 417 minutes between them this season. Kev Jack, by the way, highlighting them as his worst. That's not even 5 games combined. 5 completed 90s combined. So I think Rangers have had their fingers burnt on that front. Have we got any other suggestions before I go off on an absolute tangent about Scottish football? We've not mentioned Coutinho. We've not mentioned Adama Traore, who started well, then nosedived.
I mean, if
get anything off your chest right now, Jimmy, that you want to say, because we're going to move on to quick 5 questions pretty quickly.
If Kuleveski counts, I guess Christian Romero also counts, technically.
Yeah,
he's been pretty good for Spurs as well.
One shout as well is Lo Celso going out to Villarreal. Since he's been there, I think he's got like 5. He's in them. He's definitely in their 11 most used players in the Champions League. In the Champions League, he's averaging like 5.5 tackles and interceptions a game. He's averaging as many progressive passes as Dani Parejo, which Dani Parejo is having an unbelievable season and is an unbelievable player. So that is no mean feat. And they've got to the semi-finals of the Champions League. So in Villarreal terms, that is immortality. So I think that loan deal for Lo Celso is a great move.
In terms of underrated careers, Dani Parejo is right up there.
Yeah.
I mean, the man was carrying Valencia for about 3 or 4 years on his back, wasn't he? And is now, looking great at Villarreal. What a fine vintage is Dani Parejo. The correct answer for all of this is Jota, though. Celtic's Jota. So
I was going to say Sarabia at Sporting.
No one knows. No one knows who that is. Everyone just thinks, "Oh, who's this?" Like they think you're talking about. They think you're talking about Diogo Jota, and then they're disappointed to discover it's.
Hasn't he got? He's got decent hair, hasn't he?
Chat. No, Jota's much sexier.
He's got some decent hair.
Yeah, exactly. Right, we need to actually categorically give our best and worst loan deals before we move on. So I'm going to start with you, Gelad. Best and worst.
Best loan deal. If it counts on technicality, then Kulusevski, sorry. He's been, fantastic. Worst, I will go with Martial.
Okay, nice. What, who are you going to go for, Pat?
Saul, I'll go.
Best, if Kulusevski counts, probably him. Oh, a guy we didn't mention is Alexander Nubel to Monaco, who's also had a really good season. I'll say Saliba just to be different.
Okay.
Worst, yikes. I think the Ali van der Beek moves to Everton, if they just replace those with 2 competent defensive midfielders in January, they genuinely might have stayed up.
Dele Alli yet to start a game, by the way.
Yeah, so
just 8 sub appearances.
That's really, really bad. Those genuinely could be the difference between them staying up and going down. So that's as bad as it gets.
I'm going to be heavily partisan. I'm going to go Cameron Carter-Vickers for best.
Jesus, wow.
Kulusevski can suck it, and I'm going to go. Yeah, Aaron Ramsey for worst. I mean, Rangers was 6 points ahead in the league when they signed him, and now they're 6 points behind us, although we do play them today, so could have egg on my face. He could bag. Let's see what happens. Let's move on to quick 5 questions then. As always is the case when I host Sunday Vibes, it is much longer than is necessary. We're on 50-odd minutes now. Let's just do one then. From at Jeffrey0699, the most underrated manager outside of England. Have you got an answer for this, Patrick?
I mean, isn't it the same answer it always is? It's Galtier. It just always is Galtier. I mean, the guy is incredible. Though Alguacil as well at Sociedad is obviously like a really good manager, and I think probably should get a move at some stage if that's something he's interested in. But Galtier is really amazing. When you look at the way that Nice changed overnight, essentially, from when he came in to now, it's pretty incredible. So Galtier.
Yeah, I think Gallardo is normally my go-to answer for this, but Gerardo Sione at Bayer Leverkusen, I think, is a good candidate. He came from Swiss football, didn't he? Extremely impressed with them when Celtic played them in the Europa League group stages. Kind of followed them a little bit since. Zachary, have you got an answer for us?
I was going to mention Stefano Pioli at AC Milan. Considering that attack is the age of my dad, he's obviously being top of the league and getting Olivier Giroud and Zlatan and the best out of them lot, and obviously the defence and etc. I think he's obviously done a fantastic job. Be interesting to see him step outside of Italy. Just loves Italy, doesn't he? Doesn't ever want to leave the country, really. So for job, obviously, if he goes on to win the Serie A, he'll definitely be maybe up there for a few big jobs.
Yeah, it's just common practice at Italy to have managed half the league.
Yeah, literally.
By the time you've finished your management career. But yeah, found a home at AC Milan and is prospering, and fair play to him. I think that's a good answer, mate. Let's round off the show then with a personal question from at LFCLIJ, and he is asked, or she is asked, what aftershave are you currently using, gentlemen? Which one would you tout as the best?
I'm using one that was not cheap. I'm using one called Kirky. It's called Kirky. It's very nice. It does the job, and the first day, to be fair, no, the first day I ever wore it, I went to Sainsbury's and someone tapped me on my shoulder and was like, "Oh, what's that aftershave you got on?"
Nice.
And it was that, and so I've had that a few times. And Joe Tomlinson every single time goes, "What's that?" And I tell him it every single time. But yeah, no, that's what I normally use. Either that or Manscaped.
Kirky, not the nicest sounding name. Not very
I
exotic,
might have pronounced
is it?
it
Sounds
wrong.
like an extra from Coronation Street.
Yeah, better than like Hugo Boss, isn't it?
How is this spelled?
Okay.
Kirky.
Kirkee.
Kikee.
Where's
the R coming from?
Kirkee.
Jesus. All right. Fair enough.
Right, we're moving on. What's your eau de toilette of choice, mate?
Well, I prefer an eau de parfum. I find they're longer lasting.
Right, you are.
Well, they're different.
What on
They're
earth is
different.
that?
But I use the best one in the world, in my opinion, is Histoire de Parfum. It's a Jules Verne one. It's like, I don't know, it's called like 1828 or something. It's like a year, and it's just absolutely unbelievable. But I've also been wearing Botany Bay by Heikel's, which is really nice as well. Heikel's are a Margate based brand, and they make
Champion of small business, Patrick Van Straaten.
and they make, if you're from Kent as well, they make incredible natural eau de parfum. Actually, they're just parfum, and they do amazing candles as well. So that one smells like sea salt. It's really aldehydic and fresh.
And if you use code DutchDestroyer20 at checkout,
I actually think that if you are from Margate, if you're from the surrounding area, then you can get a discount because they're really big on
Local.
being a local company. So that actually is something worth thinking about.
Oh, yeah.
I like it. That is charming. I enjoy it. And I'm at the opposite end of the spectrum. I use Black Orchid by Tom Ford. And it is actually a unisex cologne I learnt recently. Maybe that's why I enjoy it, because I've always been a little bit effeminate. So there we have it.
Nice.
That's it. Do we have anything to plug across Football Daily, Euro Football Daily, the podcast, the Snapchat? Zach, you're good at plugs. Tell the people where to go after this.
Yeah, well, if you've not already seen the Football Daily Explained that went out yesterday, then make sure you check that out. Why not check out Continental Club, where Doogie and the gang have also spoken about football, but more European-based? And why not check us out on Snapchat, where we bring you daily content on either Football Daily or our show Transfer Talk, which gives you the latest gossip about the world of football.
What a professional. We nailed the intonation throughout there. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next week on Sunday Vibes. Hopefully from the pub, but no promises. Bye.